Hi, everyone. We're here for another episode. I'm really excited because today I am bringing a no-code specialist here who actually didn't start off in the tech world. He started in the business world. His name is Jonathan Timianko. He is the founder and CEO of PierShare. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us here. And I would like to start this off by you giving us just a quick sort of background on yourself and tell us as well what PierShare is all about.
Sure. So my name is Jonathan Timianko, and I am from New York, New Jersey. And I started a company called PierShare. So basically, PierShare is a website, but soon to be deployed mobile app that will allow individuals who have a dock for a boat attached to their house, their retail store, in a marina, anywhere a dock can be, to allow boaters to rent that dock for any length of time. So daily, weekly, short-term, long-term. So this business actually started a few years ago. The story is actually pretty interesting on how it started. It wasn't an idea that I just thought out of nowhere. It's not something that easily comes to mind or, that you think about on the spot. I'm from New York, New Jersey, and I'm from suburban New York City. There's not much boating activity in our area. And my parents or my family, we ended up moving down to South Florida on the water. My parents bought a house on the water, but they didn't have a boat, and it had a dock attached to it. So the dock was empty, and they moved into the house, and one day our cousin called us because his friend had his boat in a marina, and the marina was doing repairs or maintenance, and he had to move the boat. And the boat wasn't just like a 25-foot boat. It was a 70-foot motor yacht that was really big. So, my impression was that people with those size boats already have houses that have room for that boat. They live on the water. It's either that or they're in a very expensive marina. So one day, a couple years ago, this guy brought his 70-foot boat to our house and paid my dad a couple $1,000s to keep it there for 1 month. And I was working in a corporate accounting job at the time, and I was, career was going pretty well. And, I was just thinking maybe about the next steps, the year after that. And I just saw it happen. I was like, there could be a market for people keeping boats at other people's houses on the water, and it may exist. So let me check it out, see what happens. So fast forward a couple years later, we've processed $700,000 worth of docking transactions through a platform for this transaction built using NoCode Tools. I, believe it or not, I don't try and give myself credit or, want to.
I'll give you credit.
Okay. If someone else gives me credit, then I'll take it.
Good.
So believe it or not, I have built a platform where we've done 700,000, basically built it entirely on my own, a platform that has done $700,000 and docked about 250 boats so far. The interesting thing about this model is that it's very different from traditional rental models that are online right now. Right now on Airbnb, if you want to go, it's usually for a short-term booking. You put in like a start and an end date. This platform is actually a mixture of a lot of different lengths of time, daily, weekly, short-term, long-term. Believe it or not, out of the 250 boats that are docked right now or have docked through the platform in total, around, I think about 25 of them have been docked for over 2 years and counting. So, in terms of, the genesis of this product and how we've gotten it to this point, our minimum viable product was just, let's recreate the traditional rental platforms that are online right now, like Airbnb. They have like a short-term booking system. You put in a start date, you put in an end date. People are going to be sailing down the coast. They need a dock for a couple days. Let's put that up. And a couple people did that in the beginning, but around 5 or 6 boats in, people started requesting 1 month, 5 months, a year. And then once we started seeing that so early, we realized that the model was going to change very significantly. So when between boaters, we put up our MVP, our initial product, and then between those boaters requesting something different that we thought, that was different than what we thought, combine that with the fact that, homeowners as well, they didn't want short-term people, they wanted long-term people. We really had to go back and iterate the product and really change the entire structure of the platform after it launched. So, long story short, just like the Airbnb guys went into houses and met with people, I went to people's backyards and looked at their docks and saw boats coming to those docks, saw what happened when those people interacted, what they said to each other, and all those interactions that you have with those early people, that really can teach you how to build your entire platform the right way and not the wrong way. Because if you don't talk to those people, you don't find out what they want, and you don't take the time to find out what they want, you can build something entirely wrong, and then the company can't scale further. So basically the last couple of years has really been about figuring out exactly how to structure this platform, not only figure out how to structure it the right way, but learn from each boat that was being docked through the platform one after another, and basically using those transactions or using that knowledge to now deploy our mobile app that will be built the right way, not the wrong way, and to start scaling significantly in the next.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that you're right. I think that, well, first of all, I'm disappointed the story didn't go, I was trying to park my mega yacht and I didn't know where to park it. So then that might be the story in a couple of years, by the way.
The ultimate dream is to build the product, and then as the entrepreneur build the product, use your product to dock your boat. Or the Airbnb guys, they lived in Airbnbs for like years. That's the best feeling in the world,
Absolutely. And so I think that you're totally right. I mean, you were able to identify a very good opportunity that hadn't yet been tapped in a market that was still really people weren't really looking in that direction in terms of that specific model, right? And I think that you did maybe the best version you can do after someone sort of getting an idea and just building out the full idea. It was like you're building this on a specific use case. But even there, the idea that you had just used that one use case to build the entire model instead of kind of going and trying to see what the trends were throughout several customers. But the great news is that you actually identified a model where people were interested in general in the value prop. So that's kudos to that. Some people build out these whole platforms with a great idea, and it ends up no one actually wants it. That's the biggest reason people fail, actually.
Right. So, that initial docking with the 70-foot boat, it definitely gave an indication that there was a market for this.
Demand, yeah.
Right. There was something, but you can't just use one person. I think, if I had to, obviously hindsight's always 20/20. And when you're making mistakes, when you build a startup, you don't know if they're mistakes until later, but they may not necessarily be mistakes because you can't, rewind the tape. But, I think maybe I, when we launched our MVP, maybe I could have spent a little less time, 2 or 3 months from, on building something that may have had to be rebuilt because the one boat that came to our house, he stayed for 3 weeks, and then I automatically assumed that everyone would stay for 3 weeks. So maybe I didn't do a little more research, but it didn't cost that much time.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's all relative. When you're in the beginning, 2 months is not a big deal. It depends on your situation. But
and I mean, you nailed the value prop in general. That's what's important to highlight here. It's you nailed this problem, right? People have docks. Some people need to park their boats, and there's this big gap between that, and it's complicated, and other options might be more expensive or something like that. So you had nailed it. You just hadn't really understood that there were different segments of people with different problems with it. Some people who want to do that for the long term, some people in the short term. But regardless, you had at least proven your business model, and that was
I'll tell you another trick. Sorry, did you had something?
No,
else?
Go ahead.
Another trick that's very useful in the beginning is by looking at that one boat, I definitely knew there was a market of some kind. But I took an additional step to prove the market that really didn't require any money. It just took some creativity. And what I realized was that, I imagine the person that would use this product would type into Google, rent a dock for a boat. So what I found out was there were actually other classified ad websites that were having people list their docks. There's a site that was from like the 1990s that was very old, and believe it or not, they had people listing their docks and paying classified advertising fees. That the owners of these homes with these docks were paying classified advertising fees to list the spaces. So what that means is that they're paying that money because they know that that website can bring a boater to their dock through that website, and there are people using that to do that. So what I did was I created one of those dock advertisements. Even though I didn't necessarily have a dock, I just wanted to put up a listing or two to see what would happen. Maybe I'll get an email if I put like my dock up. So I put my dock up, and within 2 hours, I had like 10 requests. And then within a week, I had about 50 for one dock. And then I said, you know what? Here's what else I'm going to do. And this is at the same time that I was building the actual product for this. So I was building the actual product on Bubble, not like a classified ad, but like the platform that everyone loves. It's I'm living in two different worlds. So what's interesting is that the way I got my actual first customers for the platform that eventually launched was I took those two ads that we had for, as like tests, and I made 20 of them. And I ended up making 20 to 40, and I kept growing it based on actual people on my platform that I had called on the phone to list on my site. And then I would channel those people that would request the website, the docs on the website that actually had the traffic that had been around for a long time to me. And what I would learn from their interactions is actually how they would dock their boat on my platform. And it was just an instantaneous channel of people. It costs like no money, and it proved that there was demand. I think you see
what smart, by the way. I love that. That's so smart. And I think that like people, like that's one of the things that we teach really like heavily in our thing is like, there's a reason why there's this approach in the startup world of like getting your first 100 customers. It's not that scalable, but it's about understanding the depth of their psychology and really getting into their mindset so you can develop things that basically are in line with that. But I think that, the people who you are looking to target, no matter what they are, pet owners, this, that, the other, there are communities out there where these people are asking questions, where these people are interacting, groups on Facebook, LinkedIn, stuff like that. And there are ways to basically prove buyer demand without actually having to do too much work. And I think that what you did there is exactly that. It's like you just found this smart little hack. You went in and you were able to get conversations with the actual people who would eventually be your key demographic to target. And you were able to prove that they were not only willing to say, yeah, this is kind of cool, I like this, but yes, I want to pay for this. Here's some money. And then to use that insight, it's so brilliant. That's so smart. I love it.
Well, I think also, an important thing to realize as an entrepreneur starting out is that, obviously everyone dreams about being the tech billionaire and the millionaire with, having a huge company around the world. And I mean, I will fully admit, it's not exactly the most fun thing in the world to spend 20 minutes to 3 hours targeting 3 people in the world. That's not the most fun thing in the world. And when you're doing it, and we talk about these hacks and all this, in retrospect, yes, it looks brilliant. But in the beginning, when you have nothing and you're doing it, it's not exactly fun. But it has to be done because you have to learn from those people what they want. And the first 100 customers, the first 100 paying customers in any business, they're the most important ones. They're the most important ones, not only from giving them great customer service. you want to give them great customer service because you want them to come back. And any early customer, it's like with any entrepreneur, like if you open up a store on a street, obviously the first people that ever walk in, you want to give them the best service. And that's the mentality in physical businesses and non-tech businesses. But in tech businesses, that is unbelievably important, way more important than a physical business, because those people are going to teach you how to build your actual product later. You need to build the actual product that scales later, and you need to deploy something out now that brings those first 100 people in right now. If you do not bring in those first 100 people, the huge mega global platform will never exist. It will never exist. So you have to bring those first people in. You have no choice, which means that you have to do anything and everything possible to bring those in. So not only did I put up those ads on that site, I actually called 1,000 people with docs manually on the water, and 875 said complete no. 125 out of those, I think 20 to 30 said yes. The rest said maybe, and then they never got back to me. But the first 20 docs on this platform came from those calls. So if you don't, it's very simple. I mean, this is something that just blows over people's heads in technology. If you don't make those 1,000 calls, you will never have those first 100 people, which means you will never have the platform you want. So as an entrepreneur, if you're going to say to yourself, okay, I'm a tech entrepreneur, I want to build this product, I want to build this platform, you need to be ready to make those calls, because no one else is going to make those calls for you. You can't hire someone to do it. It's going to cost too much money in the beginning. You can't pay for them. You have to find them. You have to walk to their houses. I also walk to houses as well. You got to walk to their houses, and you have to call them and get them. And that's it.
No, absolutely. And that's so important. It's just to say, like, even if you're a complete tech guru, and that's the problem with like non-technical founders, they think like, oh, if only I could find a developer who would build this thing for me. And oftentimes they do. And then they reach the hard realization then that they have this fully built product, oftentimes that does not meet the sort of customer need. And now they have to start from the ground up to actually build a business around it. And that's really sort of the wrong approach to building any company, if you ask me. And I think that's going to slowly change over time. Let's talk a little bit about you going from, I'm guessing that at a certain point as a non-technical founder, you're like, okay, I want to build this platform. Did you start off by reaching out to a couple developers and seeing what they would quote you?
Nope.
No, you just basically, so how did you discover sort of NoCode, and tell us about that feeling, how long it took, and how expensive it was to build out that first iteration of the product?
Yeah, so I was working in a corporate accounting job. I had previously worked in IT consulting. So I actually I wasn't a developer, but I did have exposure to developers over a number of years in a large hospitality company in the US, in Florida, actually, believe it or not. I was traveling to Florida back and forth for consulting and working with developers down there and for a large hospitality client. I can't say who it is technically, but I think you can probably imagine. Large hospitality client in Florida. I think everyone knows who it is. So I was working there, and that was a few years back. That was before my next job in a large accounting firm in New York. That was not a technical job. So I kind of did both. I had an exposure to both technology and business after college. I had like kind of a mix of the two experiences, which I think was a good thing. And when I was working in the corporate accounting job, that boat that I talked about, the 70-foot boat, it docked in our house while I was working in that job. So I actually, I didn't quit that job until I think 6 to 9 months after that, something like that. They go back, and it's a couple years ago, but I actually took the first steps of figuring out how to build this product while I was currently employed at that company. And I was, I started like looking around at the NoCode tools and really started, thinking about how I was going to build the product. I did a lot of the customer research in that period where I was still working in that job. I wasn't really building the product at all. I was just thinking about how to do it, and I eventually, built. I ended up building like a very, very rudimentary like MVP landing page, simple, like put up a doc, press that you want to doc here, get that page up. And then once I did end up leaving that job to pursue this full time and to really build out the platform the right way. In terms of the tools that I found, PierShare is built on the Bubble programming language. When I first started out, in terms of thinking about, building the product, my first thought was not, oh, how do I find a developer to do this? How do I do that? My background is very, I come from my family. My dad was an entrepreneur and he was very self-reliant, and I come from that like mentality. He wasn't working in a corporate job. He built a retail carpet store in the U.S. pretty much from scratch, and I came from like a culture that really stresses self-reliance, not relying on other people. And my mentality when I first started out was, I just really don't want to go down the hire developers VC path. Like I was thinking to myself, anything I can do to avoid that whole thing, I will do it. Because the reason I wanted to do that was not really just to make it go faster. It was to actually learn how to build a tech business from the ground as a non-technical person. I saw that there were tools coming out like Webflow, like, WordPress and all these other tools that allowed non-technical people to put something up there, which was not the case when Airbnb started out. They really had to go like the full developer route. But I kind of call it the second wave of the internet, like from 2008, post Airbnb launch, 2010, Uber coming out. From 2010 to 2016, 17, there were new products that came out, although they're not as developed as they were today. But they, when I first started out, I saw that there was a way to get to a point where I could get something online. It didn't like just something. I just had to get something out to prove something. And I didn't need to go the VC route. I didn't need to go the developer route. So I ended up finding Bubble by just searching the internet for tons of tools, comparing them on all the comparison websites. Does this do that? And I was playing around with Webflow and WordPress, and they just didn't do what I wanted, because even in its most rudimentary form, I knew that the platform I would build would maybe it wouldn't be built exactly like Airbnb, but it would need to have a database. It would need to have, the ability to create a user interface that wasn't entirely dependent on a template. And I would need like a user sign-in. I knew I was going to have user sign-in. So I started playing around with the other tools, WordPress and Webflow, and I found out just the basic stuff I needed. The basic stuff it just wasn't easy.
They just didn't exist yet. Now it's a different story, but yeah, they was just like, they weren't around yet.
But Bubble existed. So once I got to their page and I saw what it did, I did at that point when I first started, I had lingering questions like, okay, can this be a permanent solution? Because their platform, I was one of the first probably 30,000 Bubble users. They now have 400,000. I mean, that's a lot of growth for the last couple of years. And, they were starting out, but what they did in the beginning was they proved that they had more than the other stuff, the templated stuff. And I think, Squarespace was very well developed at that point. WordPress was very well developed. And like, if you want to put up a blog or, a shopping cart online store, that was fine, but I knew I needed more. So I started with them, and I never looked back, because I didn't necessarily know it when I first started. But as time went on, and as I learned more about Bubble, what it did, the NoCode movement in general, as it started flourishing and there was a bigger community, there was, the forum was getting more active, I made a snap realization one day. I can't point to a particular functionality, but everyone has that light bulb moment where they're like, oh wow, like I really can fully build this all on my own without developers, and I don't need to go that route at all. And I mean, I think if you want to have a big global company eventually, you do need external money to be a global company. I'm not saying that. But what no code allows you to do is it allows those founders who have a great idea, who may not be able to raise money in the beginning or to hire developers, it just allows them to get out the gate and prove something. And now what we're learning, I think, is that, I think when Bubble first started out, maybe they thought, okay, this is a way to get something out and to get some initial customers first, but you'd have to raise money later because you need all this custom stuff and everything. But I think what's really happened in the last year or two is that people are, and I think this is really only recent, people are really fully realizing, I think for the first time, that yes, these tools are a complete replacement for all of those developers. Not to say that those developers can't do great stuff, they'll just do more important stuff. They'll do the next stuff like AI, machine learning, that you can't do that on a no-code platform. It's all a genesis. I think these platforms are allowing the Airbnbs of tomorrow to be created now, and then maybe they'll be around for AI, machine learning. That'll be later. But, you don't need developers anymore. But one thing I would like to highlight is that you need to think of these tools as tools, and although Bubble technically wouldn't want me to say this, tools and nothing more than tools. They are building a huge community, and I don't want to discount that. But, at the end of the day, if you want to be a tech entrepreneur and create a huge global platform, you need to be building everything on your own using those tools. The tools are what allows you to get to that point, but you have to build it. No one else is you can't just take the easy path and say, okay, I'm going to have developers easily create this and all that stuff, because it's never easy, that route. And in fact, the no-code tools are proving that it's infinitely harder for a developer to do it. It would be infinitely harder for me right now to have 5 to 7 developers custom developing this than me using Bubble by myself. I know that's crazy to imagine, but it really is, I think, one of the biggest change. No code is, I think, one of the biggest changes in technology since the iPhone was created, the internet was created. Potentially, it's going to open up a whole new wave of applications that otherwise never would have existed.
Man, you are hooting my horn, man. I love it. I think
Do you want to hire me?
Sorry?
You want to hire me?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think your salary will probably be a bit high, seeing that you're running a company.
It'll be higher than what I'm making right now.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, like, listen, I'm a complete ambassador of this, and I think that the reason why I even started We Are No Code is because I think that there's kind of the biggest problem happening in the no code space is the fact that people can't believe it yet. People don't believe it yet. Like, people are taking a while. And you said, there's a lot of limitations, like you can't do machine learning, AI. I'm starting to receive decks of people who are allowing you to tap into APIs that you can also build through things like Bubble, where you can leverage augmented reality within apps, artificial intelligence, machine learning. I mean, it's just becoming more and more clear to me that the capabilities are increasingly becoming huge, and that I don't think that developers are going to be replaced. I think there's a lot of like friction there, by the way. Like developers are like, yeah, you can't do anything real with no code. That was absolutely true 3 to 5 years ago. Today, I would like to, very, very peacefully, completely disagree with you. And I think that it's because, if you look at, I had an interview actually yesterday with a guy who said, I was in design school and then I discovered Webflow and I quit because I realized that entire thing was going to be replaced. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And I think that to a certain level, it's true, right? But I believe that developers should be learning no-code tools as a way to go quicker, to build things that and then for the things that they're quicker at building with sort of custom development, absolutely do it. We're just talking about a different, a third level to the sort of natural evolution of development. At first, it was Morse code, ones and zeros, people putting in punch cards.
Assembly, right? Exactly.
Then it was let's write out these lines of code individually, so that so you don't have to put in these ones and zeros. And now it's just an extra layer where it's like, well, hey, most humans are visual beings. We process visually better than other ways of processing, and visual programming makes more sense. And no code, it has a lot of definitions. But visual programming is maybe when we're talking about building the core product, is probably the best way to really talk about it. So it's a fight, basically. It's an educational fight where people don't know this is out there yet. And my theory is basically that building the product is not enough. Like everything you just highlighted, you have to build a community of customers. You have to understand these people, understand how you can do outreach, how marketing, all these different techniques you can use. And if we do that, we can basically empower a whole new generation of business owners who on their own can build $1 to $10, $20 million companies without giving any capital away, without raising any funds, without having to hire expensive developers. And that's what I'm excited about. It's more about how can we impact, because it also is breaking all kinds of lines. It's like, now it doesn't matter if you went to Harvard or if you just know how to use Facebook and you live in a third world country. Like, you have equal chances to adopt some of these tools and to learn. And I think that's what I think is like a magical thing with no code. It's like the ability to level the playing field, right?
Well, if you want to talk about level the playing field, I'm at a disadvantage because I'm not in San Francisco. This company, I'd have a lot of trouble probably getting funding if you live in Minnesota or Kansas. You're already at a disadvantage. So these tools give you that access. But I want to go back to the word no code for a second, and I want to make an important clarification. So I think no code is a great branding term, and it's definitely the code the term that should be used as the marquee of this movement. But I actually think that that term does a disservice at the same time, and I'll tell you why. It's because when you're building using no-code tools, you are theoretically using code, but you're using someone else's code that they packaged and gave to you. So if you go, Bubble has a document out that says, the title of the document is Explain Bubble to Investors. Because, if you're raising money for a company, eventually, hopefully, we'll do that. And the investors want to know, how did you get to your product to the point where, you didn't need developers? And they're going to start questioning, we need developers, all that stuff. And I think an important clarification to make is that you need to look in that document. It says that technically, this is not advertised for Bubble, but they say this in this document. Technically speaking, Bubble is a platform that allows individuals to stitch together custom-coded JavaScript modules into a working Node.js application that runs in the cloud. So what that means is that they're creating those modules, that code, and they're putting it on a platform that they host, that they give to you, and they give you those modules, those blocks, so to speak, and then you stitch your application together. So I think what people don't realize is, that's been done forever. The entire GitHub company is based off of the idea of developers writing code, sharing it with other people online, and then those people taking that and putting it in their applications and customizing it. So I think,
these tools have just made a better interface
right,
for the stitching, for the building. And what's funny is I read a tweet the other day that basically said, hey, every single industry, every single creative industry has a GUI, which is basically, it's graphical user interface.
That's right.
Except for web developers. If you think about it, people who are producing music, they use Pro Tools, right? It's a visual way of, doing that stuff. You think of Photoshop for designers, or Sketch.
Everyone suddenly became a professional photo design editor. Everyone,
and there's no going back, right? Like you're editing video. If you're doing like video editing and you have, the Adobe suite, or like, there's no going back. Why? Because it's just a better way for people to build. And, there might, I just believe that it's crazy that it's taken this long for there to be good interfaces built around development and web products. And I think it's exciting. It's a very exciting time. I think that there's basically, like everything, like if you think of, like, it came out ahead of its time 5 years ago, maybe, like as like this no-code movement. And I think, as you mentioned, like no-code is a great term to market it. But right now, the biggest problem is awareness and marketing. So that's why I'm still really adamant about no-code. It's because it's just an easy, you hear no-code, it makes someone who doesn't know how to code understand that they don't have to learn how to code, and they can build software products. But yeah, I think it also came out ahead of its time. Like, let's talk about VR, virtual reality. It came out ahead of its time. All the investors were making big investments because they invest 10 years down the line, really. And basically, then there was just this huge stall in the market because the technology was absolutely not there to fulfill on the promise. And that's when people, and when the marketing came around it, is when people checked it out. So with no-code, if you look at no-code when the movement really started about 5 years ago, and you looked into the tools, it's like, yeah, you can't do very much. And people over the past 5 years have not taken the time to see the evolution and to realize that right now is the tipping point. And right now is the time where you can literally build 90% of things using no-code. And yes, if you need a little bit of custom code, that's called low-code. You pay a developer to come in, a little bit of money to build one or two little things out that you can't do with no code. And it's like, this is the future. I think that if you're a developer, you should adopt this. I think if you're a developer and you're quicker building with, like you said, like with pre-existing modules and GitHub, absolutely do that too. It's just about getting to the end, right? Like, what is the end you're trying to get to? And the means, I think that those are just like, I don't know. I think there's a bit of hate around no code, but I think that slowly will prove itself.
Well, I think another thing is that I think the way you look at the term no code is really dependent on how complex your excuse me, how complex your product is. Because I will be fully honest. Again, I don't want to give myself credit, but the product that I'm building is, I think, really it theoretically should require a full-time developer or two to, even with no code, it should require a developer too. But if you're technical enough, if you're good enough at being able to design a user interface and to learn a digital tool and to know how your application needs to be built, you technically don't need those developers. But I think in terms of, everyone's talking about, our developers going to get displaced, like we were talking about earlier. I don't think they'll get displaced. I think, if you gave me Photoshop, I would have no chance of editing a photo. I just can't do it. It's not my skill set. Another example I would give is, Microsoft Excel is an incredibly complex tool that can do simple things. People can add, numbers in a row and then sum it up. But there's people in the world, 2 to 5% of people in the world who use Microsoft Excel, who are incredibly skilled at that program and can do amazing things with that particular tool. But everyone has access to that tool. If they want to become technical enough to learn that tool to the max of their ability, then they can use that tool to its maximum potential. But there will always be a gap in the market where people will have access to these tools. They may be able to create simple websites, but can they create an automated a credit card charging mechanism that has like 3 different rows of modules that have different conditions on them to charge a credit card in a certain way based on whether someone bought something on, all that complexity? There will always be individuals who can build those products who are more advanced than maybe the people that, can't do that. And those people will use those tools. Those developers, like you said, they will use those tools to build those products for those people because they're technically minded. Another great example I can give, I can go on and on with this. But
I'd like to actually highlight something that you said. I'd like to give you credit since you don't give yourself credit. But basically, credit around the fact
if I don't have to give equity in the company,
I do require, for every compliment, it's 1%. No, no. But what I wanted to say is that basically, like, you really hit it on the head. The tools are just the tools. It still requires you to like take the time to learn the tools. And Jonathan, you didn't wake up one day and you just knew how to use them.
That's right.
You slowly put in a bit of effort, and started learning these tools to the point where you could reach an end, which was to build the platform you were looking to build. And I think that that's a super important point, because it's like, if you're willing to put in effort, and this is proven not just in entrepreneurship, but in everything in life, like some people are given natural skills. I'm not going to say that people don't start off with different skill sets, but I'm a strong believer that you can basically learn any skill. It doesn't matter. Like a lot of people tell me I'm bad at math. You know why? It's usually because someone discouraged you when you were in school to stop believing in yourself and believing in the fact that you could learn math. And with no code, I think it's like, these are tools that it's not like coding where it takes 6 years. Like, how long did it take you to start building with no-code tools?
Well, I mean, I went in and I started doing the tutorials and learning, and then you learn piece by piece. And what's amazing is with these tools is that you learn the no-code tools in a very similar way to learning the real code, because what you're doing is you're learning a base foundation, right?
Logic, design.
And then you're using that to apply it to more advanced use cases later.
But just in terms of like finding that timeline, like would you say that you started feeling comfortable in building the first little thing after a year? Was it after a couple months, a couple weeks? Like, what was roughly?
I would say, if I had to put an estimate on it, I would say that I learned 90% of what Bubble did and could do 90% of everything it offered within 4 months.
Man, compare that to 4 years that it takes to learn one coding language.
Yeah, like 4 years,
there's just no comparison. And I think that's a strong point too, right? It's to say, like, this is not just about building quickly. This is also about learning and adopting a new skill that empowers you to do these things quickly.
I want to take a great example and apply it from my childhood to this, because I think, other than the Excel and the Photoshop example, I think this is really one of the best analogies. So I loved Legos as a kid. You know where this is going. But I loved Legos as a kid. I went to Legoland in California. They have an entire amusement park in California, now Florida as well, other places in the world, where so-called Lego masters use Lego bricks to build entire cities out of Legos, and they put them on display for people to come and look at those masterpieces. People enter the amusement park, they pay $100 a day, because Lego has identified a very, very small percentage of individuals in the world who can actually build an entire city out of Legos. Now, here's what's interesting. You buy those Lego sets as a kid, and they come with directions. For you to build them, they give you a small set of bricks, you build them, come with a set of directions. They sell those because most kids can use the directions to build them, but only a very small percentage of those people will go on to become the Lego masters. So here's the analogy I can make with no-code tools. Everybody now has the bricks, but there's no directions, and only a very select few will create the Empire State Building. Anyone can do it. They have the bricks now, but they have to build it. And if you build it the right way, a lot of people will pay to use it. That's the best you can make.
No, I think that's great, because that literally is what it is, right? Like, if you take one of those little Lego blocks, that's just a piece of code that you don't know it's a piece of code. It looks like a piece of Lego, and you're building with that. But you can build solid businesses with this. You can build, like, and that's what I think I want to emphasize. It's like, yes, only a small portion of people will build the things that go on display in Legoland, but that's like saying that only a small portion of entrepreneurs will become Bill Gates and Elon Musk, right? Think of that 80% of entrepreneurs who are living really great lifestyles, building, let's call them, just those pre-made packs with instructions. And I think that's the place that we're getting to now with no code. It's this place where people can build solid businesses. And yeah, it might not be a $2 billion company, or like in the case of Elon, it's a lot more. But like you can build a solid business and really, I think that's what people are trying to get to. They're not saying like, I want to be Elon Musk. They're saying, I don't really like my job, and I've always dreamt of a life where I could be self-reliant, like you talked about, and build a company. And I think that's what like we need to encourage. It's like, I'll give you another analogy. Everyone tells me, oh, Chris, because like I play some instruments as well. Like I play guitar or whatever. Like, you're so great at guitar. But so many people are like,
I've been trying to learn guitar, but it's been really that, you know what? That's tougher than no code to a certain way for me, because yeah.
And that's the thing. Like people talk, like they just whatever. They watch me play guitar. They don't see the fact that I've been playing for maybe 10 years. But basically, everyone at an old age is just like, oh, I wish I had learned to use to play an instrument. I'm like, hey man, if you wake up today and you put in 1 hour a week, guess what? In 1 year, you can play 80% of the songs you want to play. Like that's just the reality of the world. Some people will be more skilled in guitar than not, but I think the biggest problem is people not believing that they can grow in certain things because they weren't born with the skills. Like, and that's why I encourage people to read a book by Carl Dweck, which is called like Mindset, and it's all talking about the growth mindset, and like it's like just stop judging yourself based on what you know now, but based on your growth. Because even if you're amazing at basketball, like if you're not improving, what do you have to celebrate? And that's maybe not a great example, but it's just like you should be judging yourself on your progress. Because even if you're amazing, someone who's less good but puts in more effort is going to surpass you because they've put in all those hours of practice. And so it's like anything, I believe you can learn anything at any time. You maybe will not become, Steve Vai, who's like, or Jimi Hendrix at the guitar. But that's also not the point that most people are trying to get to. You're just trying to like playing instruments is a very meditative state, and it's a great hobby. And I think that that's what people forget, is that like a lot of people in our society are like, it's all or nothing. And that's just a flawed way of thinking.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I think you hit the nail on the head. And an extension of what I would say with that is, I mean, if you look at technology today and the mentality in Silicon Valley amongst venture capital firms, entrepreneurs, it's an all or nothing deal. We invest the first $250K. You're never getting off that train. You either become a billionaire or you don't, and you roll the dice. And I just think that, no code and these tools, it truly is the great equalizer. I just think that, I actually wrote an email to Bubble support recently, not a support ticket, but I wrote them a note that basically said, I see in the news right now, because of coronavirus and all the economic circumstances right now, all the startups that got funded in the last 10 years that relied on all that money and they're just not profitable yet, they're just laying off people, and it's horrible to see. And it really, I hate to say this to a certain respect, because I don't want anyone to lose their job or anything, but I think the mindset of the all or nothing, tech is going to be, this company is going to be $1 billion versus not. I just think that the coronavirus, in a way, has probably made people realize even more that whole model is not sustainable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of sadness, of depression, of loss of ambition in the wake of that dream.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the sad thing. That's the risk we have here is more in the fact that we're driving people to stop believing in themselves because yes, if you look, like, first of all, 4 or 5% of companies get funded. Of those 4%, only about like 3% of the 4%, or like it's like something like that.
And
It's
you
like
never
actually
hear
make
about
it
the
to a
others.
bit.
You never hear about the others. The 97%, you never hear about them.
Never hear about
Swept under the rug, and it's just they fade away. Everything.
But there are real people behind those, and there are real feelings, and there are real lives. And I think that that's something that like I'm interested in changing in terms of the earlier stages of entrepreneurship. It's like there are several ways you can choose your path, but you need to understand what the different paths are, and you need to understand what you're getting yourself into. And I think not enough people understand what they're getting themselves into when they choose one of these paths, whether that's bootstrapping, raising capital from investors, getting into accelerators, etc.
Another thing I would say is that, by the way, I really appreciate the time. And I want to say also that, what I appreciate about what you're doing right now is you had told me you had built 3 companies, and you know the challenges of what this is. You know also what how no code can help people based on your past experiences. And, one thing I will say is that, Brian Chesky, the Airbnb founder, he had, I think he said, or I read an article once, one of the most important things he learned in his journey was when you go through the entrepreneurial path and you eventually become something of it, what you always want to do is you want to pay it forward. And what that means is that that other people are in. It's really tough to get a good company up and running that's profitable, et cetera. And when you do it, you always want to help the next generation or the next person get to where you got. And you're doing that right now, and you're helping people through your community with We Are No Code in doing that based on your past experiences. So I think that's very admirable. But, as an example from my path, we've done $700,000 in docking transaction volume. It's a great start, but I'm not anywhere near I want to be. It's all a journey. But I actually have a friend whose boyfriend is about to start a company. He's going to start something in the insurance space, and he needs to build a platform, but he doesn't really know about. I was talking to him recently, and he doesn't really know about no code, and he's reluctant about it, and he's been trying to find engineers and developers. And I told him, listen, I may not be Bill Gates yet, but I'm going to help you based on my experience and how the tools that I'm using can help you get to the next level, because I can tell you this is really the way to go. Like,
people want a quick button, and unfortunately in entrepreneurship that doesn't exist. Entrepreneurship is a career, it's not a job. It takes years of experience to become very good and to increase your chances of building a solid, big company, and to have that run for years and generate revenue for you. So that's something that I try to tell people. It's like there's just this over sort of glorification of being an entrepreneur. The realities, as you and me know, are very different. It takes a lot of hard work. And I think that people have to basically be willing to go through that, like just to take the smarter path. There are smarter paths than just trying to figure it out on your own, trying to rely on a bunch of other people. This is about your own growth, and that's what's going to eventually bring you to success in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and not only do people have to be willing to do it, it's about loving doing it.
Yeah.
So I think one thing that's really important is you can't. It's not worth it to spend 3 years building a tech company if you don't love the steps of doing it. Yeah. So I think the way to think about it as it relates to NoCode Tools is that they're making development fun again. I mean, some people,
You should sell that. You should trademark that. Making development fun again.
If I get another catamaran docked on my website in the next hour, that'll make me slightly more happy. Full disclosure. But
very cool. No, well, let's take this offline, because I think there's a conversation around what you were talking about in terms of the growth that you're trying to the next level. But before we do that, where can people find you if people want to reach out to you?
Yep. So the website is PierShare.com, PierShare. We also have a LinkedIn page, a Facebook page as well. No Instagram account yet, but soon to be coming eventually. If you go to the website, we have like a support area. You can reach out and send emails to the company inbox as well, and go from there.
Awesome. Jonathan, this was super inspiring. I mean, I think that your journey and what you've built and the fact that you come from a corporate background with no coding skills is inspiring for other founders moving forward to take this step. And I think you said it basically in your own story. When you got started, you didn't have to quit your job. At first, you don't have to quit your job.
That's right.
And that's one thing that people think. They're like, oh, the only way I can start on this great idea I've had in my whole life is by quitting my job. That is not the truth. And you are a testament of that. So thanks so much for showing the example.
Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
You too.
And bye to everyone who has been watching.